Using London to launder dirty Russian money has its origins in the politics of the 90s and 2000s, an era of political engagement with Vladimir Putin. That led to many rich Russians being encouraged to come to the UK through so-called golden visas, offered to the world's global elite in exchange for at least £2 million in investment into the country. Many made London their home, but it also made London a home for dirty money. But that ends today, according to the Home Secretary, who rushed through the closure of the scheme. It was wound up officially at 4 p.m. That's 7 p.m. Moscow time.
OK, good. So it's incredible that's a fly.
Part of a wider show of force from the Prime Minister. Today, visiting a military base in Lincolnshire, he said more measures cracking down on Kremlin-linked cash are to come.
We have already some very tough laws on money laundering, on people laundering ill-gotten gains here in the UK. But clearly, it's time to bring in some tough sanctions against the Russian regime, against big Russian companies, organisations of strategic importance, and also making sure that we stop the raising of funds by Russian companies on London financial markets.
His critics say it's just political posturing, opportunistic and long overdue, given that the government was accused back in 2018 of struggling to get a grip of the issue by a committee of MPs, including Priti Patel herself, whose recommendations never got off the ground.
I'm delighted Priti Patel has finally read the report that she put her name to in 2018 when she was on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and we called for this. But it's just a bit depressing that it's taken the government such a long time to play catch-up.
That report came in the wake of the poisoning of former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter on British soil, a low moment for Anglo-Russian relations. And a stark contrast to the political landscape back in 2008, when the visa was first introduced and the world was on the brink of a financial crisis. At the time, it injected some much-needed money into the system on some very loose terms. Between 2008 and 2015, over 3,000 were handed out, more than 700 of those to Russian nationals without proper checks, a period that one policy expert has described as one of blind faith.
The problem with this scheme for the first 7 years was that you didn't need a bank account to get an investment visa. But if you applied for a bank account with an investment visa, the banks assumed that you were legit because the government had given you an investor visa. And that created a gaping hole in Britain's money laundering defences.
But the Tier 1 investment visa is not the only way to bring dirty money into the UK, and it's not just Russian nationals that do it. The question of who owns some of the UK's most valuable business assets and properties has long gone unanswered. But one former minister claims that 6 years ago he was pressured to drop changes to anti-money laundering laws. He welcomes today's announcement.
You're looking at people with very significant resources. I mean, that's the whole point. So they're all going to be lawyering up in a big way. And if you have a rather depleted SFO, criminal investigations team, it's an unequal struggle. So there's a question of commitment if we're going to do something about this.
A show of strength at a time of growing tension. The Prime Minister trying to show Vladimir Putin that Russian aggression has a price.
Well, joining me now is the writer Oliver Bullough, whose book Moneyland lays out how the UK immigration system favours the super rich. You'd look at this and think, well, can any old crook just buy their way into Britain?
Well, you know, the system was changed, as Duncan Haynes said, in 2015, and that's why this announcement today is so frustrating, because this is what many people have been calling for a very long time. And the biggest problem happened before 2015. And if you look at how immigration law works, it takes 5 years to get indefinite leave to remain. After you've got that, it takes another year to get citizenship, which is 6 years. And we are now 7 years on from the end of that period. So all of the people who came in what Duncan Haynes called the blind faith period, the period when anyone could bring money here unquestioned, all of those people, if they've got decent lawyers, which they do, will already have citizenship. So essentially it is too late to do anything about this. And, you know, it's not so much shutting the door after the horse had bolted as letting the horse go out, letting it take over the farm, and then eventually sauntering over and, you know, maybe pushing the door to. It's incredibly frustrating it's taken the government so long. And really, I mean, it's political tokenism. It means almost nothing.
Right, but I mean, there's quite a lot of innuendo around this whole question as well, isn't there? As if everyone getting these visas is dirty in some way. I mean, do you have any sense of what proportion of those thousands of people who've got entry to Britain over the years using these visas are actually here to launder money?
Well, I mean, there's been analysis of some of the figures suggesting that perhaps around half of the Russians were people who had security concerns around them. But we don't really know what that means because the names of the applicants haven't been published. And also, you know, there were many people apart from Russians who received these visas. In fact, the largest number consistently has been Chinese citizens. And somehow, you know, the suspicions over their money are always completely ignored while we talk about Russians. This is a huge problem, which has been going on for a very long time, but it's really only a small part of an even gianter problem, which is the failure to enforce our money laundering and financial crime rules. As Boris Johnson said, we have, you know, very strong rules. We do have very strong rules. We just don't enforce them. You know, £100 billion is laundered through the City of London every year. That's the government's own estimate. That is a colossal sum of money by anyone's standards. And really, I would prefer it if the government were to start giving resources to our law enforcement agencies so they could start trying to stop that money, identify that money, and confiscate that money to deprive criminals of their earnings, rather than do these, frankly, rather tokenistic things like they've done today.
Well, you see the announcements and you wonder whether they've really put an end to it, because apparently there's going to be a sort of a new type of innovation visa, where if you lay out your investment strategy and prove that you're employing British people, then you can get in that way. I mean, does that just mean you need a better business advisor and lawyer?
Essentially, yes. That's the system they have in the United States. The EB-5 visa has existed more or less as long as the British Golden Visa has, slightly longer. The predecessor of the Tier 1 visa came in the early 90s. The Americans started doing this in the 80s. And their system has exactly the same problems that ours does, because they don't enforce any kind of checks on the system. And really, the incentives for the government are just to let the money come in, because as far as the government has been concerned, for a long time, this has been free money.
Yeah.
Foreigners are giving us money.
Isn't it? I mean, you know, to be blunt, I mean, if you put aside the morality, it's good for the British economy.
Well, possibly good for the British economy if you only think of the economy in terms of the very top end of the housing market. But look at it more broadly. Oligarchs don't stop being oligarchs just because they've flown into Biggin Hill and got off their private jet. They want the same things that oligarchs want in China or in Russia or wherever. They want, you know, access to government ministers. They want preferential business deals. They want preferential court decisions. They want journalists to be muzzled. All of those things possibly good to certain segments of the economy, like, for example, the legal sector, but very bad for democracy. So, yes, we are bringing in people, we are selling them access to our country, but I don't think we've really stopped to interrogate what exactly it is we're selling them when we take all their money.